in what you do.
It's a weird thing.
So when did you start your YouTube channel?
So I started it a few years ago, 2018, 2019, arc, where it's like you can donate through super PACs, political action committees, and you can donate as much as you want, and you don't have to be, your name has to appear nowhere. And so that's actually...
Initially, he thought he was going to be able to figure out a way to pull all the company's assets together and
I think
make everybody sound and repay everyone.
These guys basically, a lot of these people backed Sam with the highest endorsements. And so if you're just an average person, you're thinking, well, how much more due diligence can I do than all these other guys? You know what I mean?
Right.
It's like people get away with it. It's just there's too many people doing it. And you'll catch some people... But ultimately, a lot of people will just basically skate by, even though by all rights they should have been. I have 2 employees, and both of them are overseas. Like one of them's in London, one of them's in Ukraine. And so for me, I have to pay them, and I have to do that to everybody. I ask him, and he doesn't want to talk to me. So, but he's going on these Twitter Spaces. So I was tracking when he'd go on a Twitter Space, and I would contact the people ahead of time and said, hey. I'm blanking on the name right now. But
A1Z? What is that?
No. I'm sorry. I'm blanking on. It's this famous. I'm going to remember it right after I get out of here. It's one of the famous around, right? Kevin O'Leary's in. So you kind of think you're swimming safely with like other savvy investors. And that's what ultimately gets you to buy in. Bernie Madoff is very similar. Sam goes, oh, you won like our battle. And people were like, is it a battle when you lose billions of dollars of customers?
One guy who lost a hard drive and who's paying people to go through a landfill to try to find his hard drive because there's billions of dollars worth of Bitcoin on that hard drive.
Yeah, people lose their outright the proceeds of criminals. I mean, we know that these criminals do launder their money through a lot of these crypto exchanges, through mixers. It's just sort of the money. Like, well, how can you view this as a battle? But he viewed it as like we're sparring partners, and you won this round or you won the war
because he thinks this is going to go on forever.
I never understood how Bernie Madoff got people because it seems so preposterous. And then I fell for something very similar. And what I noticed with all of these things, the thread is all these other wallets that it's impossible to know which of those new wallets my dollar's from. It's like it's just crazy. It's a crazy idea. It's hard to know. So people really just take you at face value, and they have to trust that, like, oh, other people are invested, so I guess I'll jump in too.
And that's
regulation for, I guess, offshore crypto exchanges, right?
And so these campaign finance, these violations.
And that video has aged so well because it's like people are like, oh, it was all true. But people were outright calling it a fraud, like Mark Cohodes. He's a famous short seller. This stuff went down, and a report comes out from CoinDesk where it shows FTX's balance sheet. It shows actually what tokens they have. For one of the first times, it was kind of all. And ultimately, one of the ways, like even some of the candidates they donated to were through like a third employee we didn't even know about, and they were like donating through them for like all these 5 minutes or 3 minutes. So I don't want to give off the idea that like there's nothing here, but the problem is that with the
and then when you have them on, there's a lot of I wasn't aware. I'm not sure. I'm not aware of that. I don't know. There was all this hemming and
handle. Now is they're finding a bunch of campaign finance violations because he was trying to influence politics, U.S. politics. I mean, it's insane how deep. And then you'll launch your own token that people can invest in, sort of like they're investing almost in your crypto exchange. And so that was actually one of the ways that FTX he launches Alameda Research first, which is just like this trading firm, which basically the idea here is we have some ideas, we're going to raise a little bit of money, and we're going to now I can just send you $100K, it's going to take me 5 minutes.
So that's why when people like kidnap people's data and things along those lines, they'd like to get paid.
Well, there were some margin trading accounts, and I'm like, no, but there were people who didn't trade with margin. There were people who just put their money with you, and all they wanted. I used to play like a variant of League, so I know it's fun, but but it's not like fun to the point. Look, this guy's whole thing was like, I'm this effective altruist. Yeah, Elizabeth Warren wrote a letter to them. They're being looked at much more closely. I mean, ultimately, all of these things are so opaque in the sense that what are you saying in the terms of service that means that I can't sue you? You have all these terms of service that basically say none of what I'm saying is true. Like they say they can get you rich in the sales pitch, and then so he decides to donate dark to a Republican, like to Republicans. And part of the accusation is he knowingly did this through one of his there was a lot of fear of missing out, or FOMO, in the markets at the time. You know, everyone thought, oh, cryptos, you have to get in now, right? Because if you get in now,
And probably overly confident.
yeah, it's pretty clear he didn't see like the full scope of the situation, especially at first. It seemed like he thought, you know, he was like saying FTX US was gay, so like, can you do this?
So someone had to be gay to do it? Like,
No, basically they were like, we need someone trustworthy we can trust to do this. So hey, you're going to be the guy. Like FTX's influence went from the Bahamas reaching into the United States, while technically not really being regulated by the United States.
yeah, they were the number 2 donor to the Democratic
They
Party.
bring on people like Tom Brady to promote it, Larry David in the Super Bowl. They kind of get buy-in from all these big sort of names, and also they're like, look, I've been screwed by the banks. Every time the government's printing a bunch of money, where do I go? Right? You can understand the appeal, but it's just like you win. The money system has to be safe. Like your grandma has to be able to charge back her credit card when there's a fraudster, right? Like,
Yeah.
or this whole thing doesn't work. You can't rely on people being technically savvy in order to. So before, it's like if I send you $1 and then you send that dollar on, we can easily trace that back to me, right? It's like here. But if I send $1 to you and everyone's sending you $1, and then you're sending $1 to all, there was already all this worry in the past. That summer, there had been a bunch of companies that collapsed, and people had never thought FTX. It was kind of the first time anyone thought FTX could maybe not have the money. And she would drink it up because she thought that would make her better. Ultimately, my dad convinced her, like, you got to get the surgery. Like, this ain't going to fly. You have to, ultimately get the surgery.
Whiz kid, who you listen to him talk, he has an answer for everything. He's so articulate. He's so knowledgeable. Like, I listened to previous interviews before he got busted.
You're like, it's this magic internet money.
Magic.
How do you get some of that? How do you get some of that magic internet money? Well, you have to go somewhere to buy it. And so it's a crypto exchange is where you kind of go. You put your fiat. Very strange. And these offshore entities were also using like U.S. branches. Like there's FTX US, which was like more regulated, but not really that regulated. It's not having sort of like, it's maybe not big enough. They're good people, a lot of the people going after these guys, but it's like trying to catch everyone who's speeding. People, the account, fiat at FTX. And so what prosecutors are now arguing is he knew, of course, what it was. He deliberately obscured very treatable kind of cancer, and she's fine. But at the time I watched her as she's like, gets this diagnosis, gets swept up with all these hucksters who are telling her that the way to treat thyroid cancer.
So when I see something like that go down, I'm like, how did he get Steven Spielberg? How does someone like a Bernie Madoff or Sam Bankman-Fried, how does he get these people to do this? Views about what? Like you didn't start doing this. You started doing just like a normal interview show?
I was just doing a normal interview show with a few of my buddies, and I didn't really know what I was looking at the time. Then I go to college, and all my friends get an MLMs, multi-level marketing, sort of like, just like the, like, hey, you're going to get rich. So I was always getting invited to these, like, get-rich seminars.
And sell off all his tokens. Would they be still solvent today or still in operation today? Would they not crash, or was this an
of ads, like get-rich-quick schemes? Like, you've got a bunch of people, flexing in their Lamborghinis, telling you, they're like 25 years old, telling you, you want to get rich by 25 or 22. I'll show you. I made $1 million. Kept making the videos, and ultimately they never did. But I start doing that, and after I cover get-rich-quick schemes for a while, so the person's not named in the report who was donating to Democrats. We know the one donating to Republicans was Ryan Salami, but that person eventually can take that money and you can send it to what's called a mixer, which is this like fancy language for a way to like anonymize your transaction. Like you put a person in the space to where people thought, okay, well, if he's saying it, he's a guy who only says positive things about crypto because he's a crypto executive. So if he's saying there might be problems, there's probably some problems.
But
you can watch them. These are real people, Joe. You can be just like them. And so I started watching this and I started like seeing it. I'm like, oh my gosh, this is so interesting. Find out like there were just no adults in that room, and like the few adults that there were like, they had like a criminal lawyer. Well, anyway, I don't think he's actually been convicted of anything. I shouldn't say that. They had this guy, Dan Free, basically screaming about, all these scammers online. And unlike my previous work, which kind of had resonated, like it had gotten to middleman because there's no one who controls like Bitcoin. Like no one can say like no to a transaction. Now it's like there's nothing to stop you from sending that money. And then I saw all this, and my experiences up to that point, it kind of led me to like, I want to say something, but why is nobody saying anything? It just seemed like there was this, these people pitching this stuff and nobody was talking about it. So I made this random video just from the arms of one huckster to another. Like it's just like it's almost to something worse. They're just kind of grifting here. And so, but you'd see them in nice cars. And so I was like, what am I looking at? And then as I'm doing my YouTube show, I'm like, I get fed a bunch. That's what ultimately matters is how much do you have on deposits that you owe out? And so with Binance, we don't really know. The only one we have a little bit more of a look into it was they wanted to store some Bitcoin with Tom Brady. They wanted to be alongside Tom Brady. So he's like, well, there was fungibility between wallets, caught. In my view, what he did was criminal. That's why I started. But it hasn't been prosecuted or anything like that. But he's on a leaked private call. Everyone can go listen to it yourself. It's just this, or, something like Europe or something like that is you are subject to all these regulations which require you to be a little more careful.
Oh, those are pesky.
Yeah, there was a Matt Levine interview with Sam Bankman-Fried. He didn't call him a fraud outright, but he's like, hey, it seems like you're in the Ponzi business, and business is good.
Whoa. And what did he say to that?
The fact that this guy, he got away with lying so long and perpetuating this image of himself as this generous billionaire, he's sort of the next Warren Buffett, that when everything goes wrong or he broke that showed that maybe they're not as healthy as they should be, there would have been a run on the banks and people would have found out. It's just like, when are they going to find out? He happened to be the final straw, if that makes sense.
So someone would have...
FTX said in their terms of service. So one of the really big problems was they actually weren't doing that, but nobody knew because nobody had to look at their books. Like it was very opaque. Everyone loses confidence. Everyone sells their FTT tokens. No one wants to buy it. It's worth nothing.
So how did this all fall apart?
Great question. So, he was, really well regarded in Wall Street. So when people invested with him, they knew the returns were insane, but somebody found out about this God mode. And so the lawyers how do we basically cover this up? Dan Friedberg's like, how do we, what do you want me to do? And he's like, hey, Ethereum, what are we tracking here? And then it goes to some mixer somewhere, and then we don't know where it goes after that.
So when Sam Bankman-Fried was working with
there's no Ethereum left. There's no Bitcoin left. You don't have the real tokens anymore. You just have your sort of nonsense FTT tokens, the tokens you invented. And he said, oh, I used to be just like you, Joe, but then, I found out that doing Amazon drop shipping is the way to make millions of dollars. And, I used to fail, but by these little tricks, I'll have to my feeling is offshore entities should not be they're not subject to our rules. How can you allow offshore, I don't know. It's very executives, Ryan Salami or something. I think that's his last name. Salami. I don't know. I just don't know how to pronounce it. But he was like, the number 3 donor to the Republican Party. But it was all orchestrated through Sam.
What was the first video?
I started as sort of like an interview show. Nothing about scams. I had a channel before it. So after the fact, he's still playing video games, and you're like, can you have the decency to get off the video game and talk to people?
So bizarre. It's just so bizarre.
it's kind of like, okay, it's a little bit chic to be donating to Democrats. You can do that without too much, negative press. But if I'm the number 3 donor to the Republican Party, that's going to be a bad look. Hey, just make this problem go away. This is the CEO. Like, go blame it on somebody else. Go blame it on some, third party that got access to our website. Say it was like a glitch or something. And so that senator's office reached out to me. They're like, what do you think about this? And I was like, I don't know, man. You guys have to – this is y'all's thing to figure out. Ultimately, y'all's left. And ultimately, because they had lost billions of dollars, it left billions of dollars in credit claims, basically. They didn't have the money. Balances. But oops, did I tell you about this $10 billion account? Like, I forgot. It's so silly. You find reputable people like BlackRock, Sequoia Capital, they all invest in this guy. Kevin O'Leary famously promoted it for like $18 million.
They gave him $18 million to promote it?
He says money system. Especially in our modern age, it seems like you can understand where they're coming from, the average person. He's one of the leaders at the NASDAQ. He was one of the go-to guys. And so you thought, well, I invest with Bernie, like I can't lose. It's like almost, betting on the house. Act that bill. And now that it was all a fraud, or the guy who basically pushed it was a fraud, now they're like trying to retool it. It's big mess right now, and we're waiting for regulators to figure it out. Finally, regulators have stepped on the scene, but right now it's just this kind of wild, wild west. You think you have this backstop because on the books it's worth, X dollars. Let's say it's like worth $5 a coin. But what you're not realizing is the real risk is when FTX can't pay you back, they probably can't pay anyone back. That's the issue. Was FTX's problem was not CZ. Ultimately, he's kind of the guy who pushed over the house made. So he called it fiat at FTX. But it was a $10 billion hole.
What do you mean by mislabeled?
Well, it was on a spreadsheet, Joe. So he was put it on a spreadsheet for their balance sheet, and he mislabeled going to sell most of our FTT that we got from that deal. And we're going to sell it. We don't know what's going on there. And all of a sudden it starts this firestorm because people said, well, hey, can we restructure all this money that went through me like a loan so that we can, say that I took a loan out and I was donating so we didn't violate any laws. They never ended up doing that. No, they're like, hey, don't work a 9-to-5 job. Like, be free like me. And I'm like, you're here on a Sunday at 5 p.m. How free are you really? You're just that these basically nerds in cryptography thought of, which is it's brilliant. It is brilliant because it is basically it's almost impossible to trace, and that's ultimately what he was doing. But it also looks like he was donating through some of his executives, and the whole thing was shady all the way down.
The fact that they were all living together and fucking each other in this giant penthouse. This $40 billion penthouse. The things, it's insane. It's really, I almost wish
God mode on Ultimate Bet, where the CEO could see everybody's hands and play on the site, seeing everybody's hands. So he and one of the first things the guy does is he controls it, but he renounces ownership. He goes, oh, I'm passing it off to some sham director, and he goes, I don't have anything to do. I don't know. Your hands in both pockets. But publicly, he's just he's donating to Democrats because he says, oh, I'm like this, I care about all these issues.
Yeah.
But it's even more cynical than just buying one party. Lateral dollars or some asset will give you FTT tokens, which is their own invented coin. And that should have value if anything goes wrong. And people were accepting that as value, this stuff. And you start to have repeat occurrences. I just cover stuff all the time, and you see echoes of the same thing. I just had somebody just a couple of days ago I was interviewing for this news scheme we're looking at, and he said, I knew all the crypto people were trying to control regulations to favor their individual business situation. And so CZ felt like he was being cut out in Washington. They tracked his account. He's playing League while on calls about the failure of FTX.
Wow.
Just imagine the arrogance.
Is that arrogance?
I hate doctors so much, and it always seems to end up with a sales pitch. It never was hey, let me just give you this free thing. It was always there's a catch.
Mm-hmm.
So I didn't, Rich. You have $1, I'll let you trade with $100. And that's going to be like one reason you come to my offshore exchange. I can offer you more leverage than the guys who are like, A1Z, A16Z. It was one of those, Sequoia or A16Z. One of them wrote this glowing review of Sam, basically saying he's going to be one of the first trillionaires. So all these, he cleaned up on all his own customers, just basically taking their money. Like, oh, I know exactly when to fold. I know exactly when to bet. So he had God mode enabled, and then they found out tease for a while. But so I eventually pivoted into this crypto direction and learned all about that. But it started just from a curiosity about scammers, and I wanted somebody to say really perpetuated their fraud. I can break it down. How much do you know about the FTX?
Let's
situation?
break it down for people that don't know about it. So
let's do it. So
okay.
FTX was this crypto exchange, these exchanges where it was worth more. So he was arbitraging this difference in prices, and then after he made his money that way, I went to school for chemical engineering and hated it. I was miserable. I was like, I do not want my life to be earning 2% more of a bottom line for ExxonMobil or any wire transfer, and it's kind of expensive to do these. Like, you pay all these fees for wire transfers. So the idea is okay, well, if you have crypto, those wire fees can go down. And instead of taking, maybe a day or something, it'll take with regulators. They were all Sam was working really closely with regulators to try to get regulations passed. And CZ felt like he was cut out. So that stirred up this battle between them. And ultimately
do something like that. Like, why would he publicly communicate?
This is why it's so interesting to me to look at fraud. This is why it fascinates me, as well as I think it's an important thing, Coinbase or something like that.
Right.
So FTX launches. Let's start with who Sam Bankman-Fried is. He's kind of at the center of all of this. Sam Bankman-Fried is this guy who he's the son of two Harvard lawyers. Of that token, then you sell it off, and then the price plummets. So you thought you had a bunch of money, but actually it's worth nothing. There's all these new scams that have emerged as a result of people getting interested in this idea of an alternative. They kind of shut down. Myself and some other people were saying, we think they're insolvent. Because we had taken a look at their numbers, and we said, there's no way they have the money for this. They don't have the token. Launches FTX in 2019, and that's a crypto platform where, honestly, you can make a lot more money than just with a trading firm. So FTX quickly skyrockets in popularity. The crypto is... Sometimes national currencies aren't a great idea, and you want an alternative. So, look at the Turkish lira. Friedberg, shady. This guy
allegedly shady.
Dan Friedberg. No, he's definitely shady. I'll say that.
What was his? I remember, but what was his?
Make something work. If it's going to go to the public, you have to solve all these issues. And unfortunately, we saw crypto kind of go mainstream before they had crypto keys all the time. I mean, it's kind of an interesting idea where you go, I'm going to get in before everyone else. But I start hearing about these tokens. And they're like, hey, selling courses, it's always the new grift. You always have to find, because people figure it out. They go oh, that actually doesn't work. Hey, drop shipping is
chemtrails.
Let me say this. If it's too good to be true, if they're offering market returns that you want to believe in, you go, man, I want to believe this is real. And wanted to basically influence politics by just donating. And the idea is you donate to both sides, you can never lose, right?
Yeah.
If you have
finance hasn't had similar problems.
No, they've had a few runs, and they've covered withdrawals. I mean, so it's just, the problem is a lot of it's a black box assets. You can check yourself. I have $1 billion in USDC. Well, that's great. But it doesn't matter if I have $1 billion in crypto, Bitcoin, whatever, if I owe $2 billion.
Right.
He's a shark. He knows what he's doing.
What was the conflict between the two of them that led him to do that?
The conflict was, it's a great question. The conflict was ultimately that Sam was trying to get some regulations passed, and he reasons that our banks have a bunch of anti-money laundering laws. There's a reason that they have all sorts of finance laws. It's not for their safety. It's for your safety. I mean, it's they need to. Your issue is that anytime there's demand for withdrawals, you're going to encounter problems. So it was going to be inevitable anytime any store on your dollars or whatever, euros or whatever, and you put it into this crypto exchange. They have a bank, and they work with that bank. Then they exchange. I start covering it, And then I start to get cease and desist letters. They don't like that. So they start to send me, they say, hey, you better shut up or we're going to sue you. And I was like, okay, I'm not going to stop making these videos. I just Coinbase, it seems like they're, legitimate. But so much of the problem with crypto is we don't know how much of this stuff is money laundering. We don't know how much of this stuff is like sort of this is a fraud because, no one knew. There's a bunch of backing. So I made a video at the time being like, this crypto CEO just describes a Ponzi scheme.
Why the celebrities are important. And that's why
it's a huge part of it.
The connection to BlackRock is important.
Huge part. Yes, because they're the legitimacy that says, hey, I'm, will fall for something doesn't mean you're safe. Like you have to do, I hate to say do your own research because that's such an overused, like scammy phrase. It's actually such like a phrase like that, it's almost used fine. And then FTX US went bankrupt and he's the one who put it into bankruptcy. And then he's telling everyone, oh, no, the money's actually still there. I mean, he was constantly giving a conflicting narrative. It was inevitable. So something to understand. FTX was insolvent long before it was realized that they were insolvent. Right? So that is not surgery. You can just treat it naturally. Just don't worry about, hey, don't listen to the doctors. Don't listen to your general practitioner. You can just treat it with like colloidal silver. He lost it on the platform. He says the 18 million was on FTX or whatever, and he never got $1 out of it. But that was what the deal was for.
I really enjoyed you catching him on Twitter Spaces. I really enjoyed that. I listened to that whole thing because before that, you have this guy who's this, what is it? Just pure addiction. I think, those multiplayer games, those, online role-playing games, that's what that is, right? It's like
I think it's is it a MOBA?
Regulators, when he was trying to impose regulations or encourage regulations, how could that have benefited him as opposed to Binance? Like, what could they have possibly done to make it
shocking thing? And I think that shows, like, if you're running a shady empire, like, who's better than a shady lawyer to try to help you cover it up, right?
How did you get in?
We don't know. I mean, there's only a few that are bigger. Like there's Binance, very opaque company. We don't exactly know.
And what has happened to Binance since FTX went?
Because every day it's getting less valuable. So the question is,